Good afternoon. I'm Gina Grillo, president of the Advertising Club, and I'm coming to you live from Herald Square. I'm actually in the office today. I just wanted to remind everybody that the club is celebrating its 125th anniversary on July the 29th, and this event is open to all members. We're doing it outside, and we're going to be safe about it, but we would love to get all of our members in one room just to be able to see one another again. And so we hope that you can be there with us. All the information is on our website, so please take yourself there. We're so grateful for this partnership with Engine and Cassandra. We had fielded some research, and we're going to share some expected and unexpected results with you today. The topic today is something that's on all of our minds almost every day. What is the future of work? We have assembled an incredible group of leaders to discuss and share the trials and bright spots of trying to figure this all out and get us all back to business. I'm going to first hand it over to our partner, Kathy Sheehan. She's Senior Vice President at Engine Cassandra, to share some of the research, and then we will go right into the panel discussion. Over to you, Kathy.
Great. Thank you, Gina. And are we good on audio and the screen? All right. So I'm gonna give you some of the highlights of our research very briefly, and then turn it over to our amazing panel. But I think we all know that beginning in the first quarter of 2020, we knew that it was clear our work environment was changing, and it changed it very rapidly and all at once. And both employees and employers were facing unique challenges, not only from the pandemic, but the social justice movement, lots of disruptions in the area of work. And we at Engine and Cassandra partnered with the Ad Club really on a year-long journey to listen and learn about what is the potential for the future of work. And in our research, we decided to focus on what we call the messy middle. And that is really that next generation middle management leaders and cultural shifters that we believe management and leaders should be paying attention to. And what do we mean by the messy middle? These are people who are mid-career, so about 3 to 10 years of experience. And really, with the pandemic and where we are today, really caught in that middle of not being the entry-level employee, but not yet being senior enough to have to think about these disruptions within a longer context. And we think this is a really important group of people to focus on. So our work really focused on this messy middle. As I said, this was research we conducted over the course of a year. We did a panel at South by earlier this year. The work was featured in the Drum, so we're happy to share that work with you as well. But I want to give you a few of the highlights in terms of what we learned over the course of the year. And I think our learnings can really be bucketed into 3 broad areas. We heard from the messy middle that they are really looking for companies to help them grow, invest in their personal growth, and really treat them with empathy and treat them like human beings. We also learned that there was very much of an interest in creating a dialogue. So having an open, two-way discussion in terms of the future of work and what the needs, the expectations, and the desires were. And then the third area we looked at was this notion of that we can really grow together. This is something we can collaborate on and help each other, employee and employer, in terms of more creating a more inclusive and more positive work environment. And at Cassandra, we do a lot of research on millennials and Gen Zs, and this was not necessarily surprising to us because we know millennials, when we look at some of their DNA as a generational cohort, they are much more likely to take a peer approach, a peer-to-peer approach than a top-down approach. So some of these findings very consistent with what we already know about millennials, very much staying true to who they are in terms of who they are in life pre-pandemic. The majority of millennials agree with statements that they're looking for companies that they can work for that help contribute to their personal career growth and development. They really want to hear that their voice is heard, that they are listened to, that, you know, they are heard within their organizations. And again, the majority are looking for organizations that are more flat in structure and not necessarily hierarchical in structure. So this is part of the DNA that we saw pre-pandemic and came through for sure in our research as well. So I want to give you a few highlights on each of these three buckets. And that first bucket is that we're looking for companies to invest in growth and see individuals as humans. So I'm going to play a few very brief videos from our event at South by that I think really articulate the themes that we hear from folks in the workplace.
You need an individual development plan. And you don't have to wait until you land in the C-suite to get it. I think, you know, there are a number of ways and resources that can introduce this at the mid-level where it wouldn't necessarily, you know, be such a hard financial investment or commitment or hit. And you might have to get creative, you know, but a lot of us are in creative industries. So that shouldn't be part of the issue. You should be able to figure it out. Again, because these are the formative years. So whatever you can do to provide the support now to the messy middle, to kind of get those good habits in place, to get the good management skills and understanding in place, to have empathy as a piece of leadership and not necessarily seen as a sign of weakness per se, but kind of rewrite the rules at this level. I think that would change everything.
So we hear this notion of empathy and really the opportunity we have to rewrite the rules in terms of being empathetic in leadership. We also learned the second area that we dove into was this notion of dialogue and two-way communication. And I will share our next video.
The safe space looks like, whether it's in person or virtually, through like conducting anonymous surveys or even just allowing for forums for people to tell you, you know, what they need and what they're looking for, because, you know, people's needs are going to change over time. You know, what people needed at the beginning of the pandemic is very different than what they need now, almost a year later. So, you know, it's important to shift according to people's needs. But I would say I think we can, you know, help to maintain empathy in the workplace by, you know, always recognizing and remembering that we're humans first and employees second. So, you know, nobody can come into work, aka log on to their computer and hide what's going on in their real life, you know. The safe space.
So again, we hear that call for empathy and that call for a humanistic kind of approach. And the last area we explored was this notion of collaboration on inclusivity. And I think this is super interesting because it really speaks to the journey that we are all collectively on.
And because every place, when it comes to diversity and inclusion efforts, no one's perfect right now. Everybody has some of the same problems, honestly. And we all have to work together and share those secrets too. And that's the other thing too. I feel like diversity work is very collaborative. It's very much sharing of secrets. It's trying to get everybody to be in a more equitable place. And because every place.
So that in just a few minutes gives you the highlights of the research that we've done. There's a lot more behind that we're happy to share. But I don't want to delay any further. I want to pass it over to really excited to hear from our panel today. And with that, I would like to introduce Kasha Cacy, who is the global CEO of the Engine organization, and she will in turn introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So great to be here. We have three amazing panelists today. One is running a tad late, so I'm going to introduce her last, and we'll get her caught up when she gets here. But first off, I want to introduce Elizabeth Woodrum. She's the Vice President of Marketing at JetBlue. Thanks for being here, Elizabeth. Then we have Jennifer Ames, who's Vice President of Employee Relations at Voya. Hi, Jennifer, nice to see you. And Sandra Sims-Williams, who's the Chief Diversity Officer at Nielsen, will be joining us shortly. So I'm going to get started. This work really talks about what the future leaders of our company are looking for, and the future leaders of our industry are looking for. There have been a lot of news stories about record numbers of employees considering quitting their jobs. In fact, a recent survey by Monster.com indicates that up to 95% of employees are considering quitting. I'd love to start with this. Why do you think this might be? Do you have any thoughts on why so many employees are considering a change at this time? And Elizabeth or Jennifer, I'd ask you to jump in with any hypotheses you might have. This is, for me as a business leader, this was a really troubling statistic.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. So I think it's really should be unsurprising to all of us. We're clearly facing a mental health crisis in this country, and over the last 18 months, we've really asked a lot of people. Right, there's just been a lot of asked of people in their personal lives, their own resilience, and at work as well. We've really pushed boundaries, and I know my team at JetBlue has worked harder than ever. The work didn't stop because we went home, it got harder. And so I just think too, with all that time and all of this change, of course, everyone's reevaluating what they want out of their lives, but also out of work. What does that really look like? And I think it's forcing us to ask those questions around finding meaning in work, but also, where we want to be, how we want to work, with what kind of meaning or what kind of people. And so, we're all asking the big questions. It's sort of a lot of deep thoughts conversations. We have them with our friends and family and with our colleagues as well. So I think it's unsurprising. I suppose the question is, what do we do about it? How do we retain the folks we need to retain?
Jennifer, you're nodding your head at that.
Right.
Your thoughts on that?
Just to tap on to what Elizabeth said again, I think, just today I read an article about it's more than how we talk about different work models and hybrid work and things like that. It's people have stepped up and worked more hours, as Elizabeth said. People have been asked to do more. So it's going to take looking at that as well. So again, what do we do about that? Can we shift to a different hourly work schedule? Do we really take a look at that and listen, as we've been talking about and hearing in the research earlier, really listening to what employees do and seeing if we can meet them and balance out the business needs. But like you, Kasha, I was surprised at some of the statistics at how high some of those numbers are, and hopefully we can stem that tide before that happens.
Well, and I think it also points to something that came out in the research, which is this idea of empathetic leadership.
Right.
I mean, now more than ever, I think we all need to think about how are we thinking about employees and putting ourselves in their shoes and really trying to understand what they're going through and what they want, which is going to be critical over the next couple of months and probably couple of years as we get through this. Hi, Sandra, welcome. We're super excited to have you. That's okay. Are you guys seeing challenges retaining your top talent, and have you started to put policies in place that are really aimed at retaining them as your companies move forward? I'll throw that out to anybody who wants to answer it.
Okay, I think everyone is.
Yeah.
Really, I don't know anybody. I haven't spoken to anyone that has not had this come up as a subject matter. And I think part of strategy is really protecting the ones high potentials that you certainly want to keep, and having those kind of conversations that really embody you. We value you, we see you, we want to keep you. And that requires, I think, just tender loving care in special ways. Now, we can't get to people, physically quite yet, but showing them in small ways that this is important to us, you are important to us, you drive a piece of business that is really critical, and that we know that. We have to acknowledge, that you are valuable. And if you don't, then, you know, why would I stay?
That's a great point. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Fortunately, we haven't seen that yet, but again, don't think that we're immune to it. And I am also pleased to say, you know, and we've all heard the numbers of women who left the workforce over the last year and a half. That was staggering. Again, pleased to say that we have not seen that. And I think it's attributable to the flexibility that we afforded people in their work schedules and in obviously working in these hybrid roles, as we're really leaning into those now. But, you know, how do we as a country really set the stage to re-engage and be able to bring women back into the workforce? Something like 1.8 million women, which is disappointing.
Agreed. Elizabeth, any thoughts from JetBlue about what you're doing to retain your best employees? You might be a little frozen. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic. So obviously, as we come out of the pandemic, fingers crossed, there are a lot of issues to take into account. There's everything from safety for frontline workers, there's work flexibility, there's hybrid work, you know, managing different parts of the country that are in different places. Can you talk a little bit, Jennifer and Sandra, about how you are approaching coming back to work and some of the things you're thinking about as we do this, and quite frankly, as it changes on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, listen, at present, we have a schedule of offices that will be coming back online. At 25%, you have to be vaccinated. You know, that's for now. Certainly, no one knows how this is going to, you know, work out. This is a mental piece to it. There's an emotional piece to it. There's the physical and logistics piece where you have to look and see if people are feeling good about this. And so it's a constant check-in of, you know, is this the right way to do it? And so we have put the announcement out this past week, as to the offices that will open up and how we would open them up. We coined it smart work. So that we understand that there's a strategy, not just done without, you know, thought to it, and
Right.
making sure that people understand we do care about them and how they're going to be able to work productively.
Yeah, and this I'm finding this to be way harder than shutting down. I don't know how you guys are feeling about it, but you said something that was really interesting, which is it isn't just about physically how do you get people back in the office. It's, you know, there's so many emotions tied up in how people feel about safety and going back and, you know, managing this. It's, you know, it's another big, huge transition in their lives. Jennifer, how are you guys thinking about reopening and taking some of those things into consideration?
Yeah, so similar to what Sandra was saying, and we had done a very broad analysis and went to our employees and looked at the roles and found out what roles really could be hybrid. And we have put employee health and safety really first, balanced against our business needs as well. So similar to Sandra, we are just about inviting the next wave back in September timeframe. But as you said, Kasha, everyone's at a different place. We also heard from our employees, again, number one concern is still their health and safety. Yeah. So all the protocols that we have in place, again, similarly, we will be inviting vaccinated employees back. At this point, it could change day to day. Masks are still required in the office as well. Some people are not comfortable with that. Some people are only comfortable with that. We heard that 90% of people liked not having a commute. So really everyone is all over the board and on a different path. And about that 25% capacity, I think I was hearing from our other panelists, is about what we're thinking about right now. And so every company's on a different path, each employee is. And as you said, changes day to day, week to week. But we're really trying to be cognizant of those issues and respectful of each person where we can, if they feel uncomfortable about coming back, we're hopefully going to be able to accommodate them.
You know, I was surprised at some of the things that worked really well going remote. I'll be honest with you, when we talked about sending all our employees home, I was a little terrified by it. But we ended up having some good things come out of it. Jennifer and Sandra, were there things that happened when you went remote that you were surprised by that were helpful and beneficial to your companies?
I was actually in shock myself because I have never worked remotely. Never. I have never stayed at home to work. And so this was all very brand new to me. I had only been at the company for 7 weeks. And so the environment and the employees, all of this was new. And so it was a lot of emotion that went into it. I was also told that 40% of the company had already been remote, having work from home. So you had 60% you had to deal with in order for them to be able to function. I was surprised by how well we did. I really was. I was surprised how well we did. In the midst of trying to grapple with, we're actually in a pandemic. And the fact that you don't know where it was going to end. You had no idea that it would, first it was it's probably just 2 months or something like that. And then the 2 months went by, and then you kept going and you kept going. You're like, oh my goodness, this cannot be happening. And helping people mentally, we started having listening meetings where globally, because of course it was everywhere. Hearing from people, so we had a pulse on what are the things we need to focus on. Is it really equipment? Not really. Is it the technology? Not really. It was the mental health that we had to focus on. That's what came out of this. I think that people certainly started to think deeper about their own humanity and existence in the world and the mark that they were going to leave, because they didn't know. And I think it sort of woke people, it was an awakening as to, this is life and it's very short. What are you doing? And how are you doing it? And are you affecting anything in this world? So I think those were good things. I think those were good things that came out of it.
Yeah, one of the things that I personally found was, you had this window into everybody's life. And, previously we went to work and we were in our work clothes and we were in the office, and all of a sudden you were seeing kids and dogs and there was a real humanity to it. And I think seeing that lens of people's lives, really kind of brought people together and made all of our coworkers just feel more human. Mm-hmm. Jennifer, were there things that you learned during remote working that you would want to carry forward with you?
Just what you both had mentioned already. Again, I was shocked that this technology was going to work across not just the country but the world, and also, I mean, who knew that it was going to go on for so long? In my career, I never would have thought that I would be having to face the issues and help an organization through these types of challenges. Pandemic plans really weren't set until you're actually in a pandemic and understand what you really needed to be prepared to do and how nimble you needed to be in reaching out to employees. As we said, that empathy, being just incredibly flexible. It used to be, someone would panic that there was a commercial or a video, I think, that where the guy was on video and his child came through and he was like mortified, but we that came to be what was just sort of day to day. You would, people would go, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in trouble. But it was day to day. As you said, it was humanizing. We were all in this together, again, in little different ways, but we were in this together. So we've learned a lot. All of us have learned a lot. We've learned about what we can do differently. It's enabled different ways that we can work with our clients and customers and opened up opportunities. So we found the positives to move forward again, so we can have 60% of our employees hybrid, 30% or plus remote, and the balance coming into the office and or client facing. So in our client facing roles, they're finding different ways, as I said.
Yeah.
So technology has enabled some of those, and just people really coming together and thinking creatively with purposeful innovation. And that's the way we approached it.
Elizabeth, what about you? What would you carry forward from remote work?
I agree with what has been said so far completely. Just we all, I think we used to say, you bring your whole self to work, or right, we're managing the whole person. And then, work came to the whole self, right? It was just a complete reversal. And I think we woke up to what that really means. And I think most of us really rose to that occasion. So I do think in many ways it was an incredible test of our resilience and our commitment to managing the whole person. I think we all learned a lot of new skills around what that can really look like. And I think we've gotten practiced in some more difficult conversations that managers were never trained. You don't learn in business school how to talk about mental health and race, and some of the conversations that we've all had to have this year with our employees that perhaps previously were things you don't talk about at work, and suddenly we had to talk about them at work. And so, in many ways we've bonded as a team, right? Going through that together. But it's something I'd like to carry through, of course, in my own management style. And I think many will reflect on that. And of course, just the ability to create and respond in a really nimble way. We were able to produce things that before we would have said, oh, I need 6 months and a big budget. And suddenly we're doing things at home and creating really, really impactful work that connected with our customers in a way that we weren't able to do before. All my agencies just got scared that I'm cutting the budget. I'm not, but I think we just learned how nimble we could be and that we could do more with less. At JetBlue in particular too, something that I'm proud of is that this put our values to the test. Like many organizations, we've always said, oh, our values are not something that are words on the wall. They're something that we live. And I've believed that and for years at JetBlue, and I always knew that was true. And we've had difficult times in the past, of course, but this moment in time, pressure tested, were we going to live? I mean, our number one value is safety. And so safety came into a completely new light in our world, right? A new kind of safety, but integrity and even fun coming through. Could we keep it fun? And could we make decisions day to day in a nimble way through all the anxiety and all the uncertainty? Would our values hold? Would our leadership hold them? Could we live them? And, I'm proud to say that in net, we certainly did.
That's great.
Terrific point. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Yep, sorry, Kasha. There's just one line that hung in the air every day for us was, how are you doing? And to ask that question, which we were all accustomed to, but it took on a whole new meaning and it had depth to it. It really did have, I really want to know, how are you doing? And the one thing I hope we keep with that is that we are sincere in asking people, how are they doing?
Yep, it's a great point. There's been a lot of news stories about the anxiety that people are feeling around returning to work. At the same time, you have companies like Morgan Stanley basically saying you're coming back or you don't have a job. How are you balancing, the anxiety people feel with the needs of the business in potentially getting, your employees back?
Well, it really depends on the job that you have. So we do have people who are out in the field that actually work out in the field, and the request for the vaccine has been high, but we really haven't demanded it for those going into the field because they still have to wear masks. And how is that going to make people feel? you know, because there are people who feel it was a choice. And if you start going there, it's, you know, the political pieces come up. But we've tried to stay close to safety and health. And you need to stay with that, I think, in terms of having those kinds of conversations. And we are playing this, you know, day by day as we started out with the conversation. We just don't know. And with the Delta variant increasing, we will probably have to step back again and make other kinds of decisions based on that. But as we go for right now, it's, you know, vaccinated in the office, 25%. You wear a mask in public places in the office. You can have the mask off at your desk. So we'll see. You know, we'll see.
Jennifer or Elizabeth, how are you guys thinking about sort of all this anxiety versus, you know, what your business needs?
Sure, I'll agree with Sandra again. I mean, it's day by day, right? The anxiety fluctuates day by day, and just because someone is feeling okay in one conversation doesn't mean that you don't need to check in regularly. So I think we're taking it case by case. At JetBlue, you know, we do have a large frontline workforce, and we are in the be there business fundamentally, and so that's been true throughout. So we are encouraging people to come back to work physically, regardless of their role, but we're stepping into it very mindfully. There are flexible work arrangements for whoever needs that for whatever reason that they can negotiate right with their direct manager. It doesn't have to go up in a big approval process. So really pushing down some of that decision making about flexibility. And then, you know, something that I'm thinking about is perhaps a little tangential to what you asked, but is why are we coming back to the office? What's important about that? And, you know, in our business, part of it is we are in the be there business. We believe in that. There are a lot of really great things in general that happen in offices, but perhaps it's a reverse of what it used to be. So, you know, we used to come into the office to do work, and then when we needed to do teamwork or brainstorming, or we would go offsite. And so, you know, perhaps we flip that and we say, oh, work is the offsite. Work is where the collaboration, brainstorming, teamwork activities are happening on certain days of the week. And then regular work can happen remotely, right? I'm sort of trying to think about that. But, you know, back to your general question, like just doing everything we can to make sure people know that when they do come in, that they are safe, and that we'll continue to be flexible about that and reevaluate as the needs change.
Jennifer, how are you thinking about this, and how are you communicating with employees and collaborating with them on it?
Yeah, very similar to what has been said. And we're fortunate that we don't have a burning business model that does indicate that we need to be bringing people back at a particular pace. And so we've been able to be thoughtful and again, keep safety in mind and knowing the success of the remote work. So again, leaning into that 25%, inviting people back, having that flexible model, day to day, being flexible, being nimble, again, continuing to see how it goes. As Elizabeth was saying, you know, we are changing how we're thinking about what is done in the office. And we see that in the office, that will really be for collaborating, creating, and celebrating. So again, it's not the same anymore, where now perhaps the work is being done in a different place in a different way.
Yeah, I love that phrase, collaborating, creating, and celebrating, because it really does focus the in-office activities on what actually needs to happen in the, you know, when you're collectively together in person versus, you know, what could you do outside. And I think, you know, I don't know whether you guys are not struggling with this, or trying to figure it out, is like, how do you put enough structure in that kind of model so that people know when to be in the office and when not to be? I mean, we've sort of told our employees, this is the great period of experimentation, and, you know, please try different things and see what works and share that. But I think that balance of how do you put enough structure in place so people know when to be where, while also providing that flexibility for new ways of working is really important.
So, you know, Kasha, I have given great thought to the person who has started in the pandemic at a new company, as well as those young people who have just started working.
Yeah.
Working and not being able to come into an office or an organization where they are to participate, they are to be a part of a culture. And that's a whole nother piece of developing a remote culture. What is that?
Yeah.
And my neighbor's daughter just started her job. She's already bored. She says she's bored. And she's just graduated from college, her first job. And what are we going to do with that? Because she doesn't have enough direction. And how are you going to engage and embrace her into that culture that you knew existed? It did. So now what is it going to be?
Yeah.
Because
Well, and you also raised an interesting point with entry level people, especially from college. You know, there are certain norms of business that you don't learn in college. You learn them in your first job.
right.
And you know, there's a little bit of apprenticeship to it. You know, like how are you supposed to behave? How are you supposed to act? How are you supposed to dress? All of those things that, you know, new employees may not be getting when they're sitting at home in front of their computer versus in an office with their manager on a regular basis.
Mhm.
It's a really good point. I'm going to shift gears a little bit because COVID was a tremendous driving force of you know, how companies are thinking about the future of work. But the Black Lives Matter movement also caused big changes in how companies look at themselves, look at their employee bases, look at how they want to work. You know, most companies really took a look at equity and inclusion and put efforts in place to move forward on that front. For those of you who did put efforts in place, how are they holding up a year later? And are there any success stories you can share with the rest of us? Because, you know, as a leader, this is such a big topic and so much needs to be done. I think we would all love to hear from your experience in that regard as well.
So we have had tremendous success with our DEI program that we put in place just about a year ago. We had DEI efforts, but we put a sort of new initiative in place with renewed focus. And I think the success we had that we've been having, and I credit Isema Gibbs and her leadership team at JetBlue for clarifying that we couldn't boil the ocean and we needed to pick a few areas where we were going to focus and shine. And so, you know, those areas were around brand, which is largely my area, but brand is a shared function, of course, with everyone owns the brand, sourcing and talent. So, you know, talent, creating pipelines, making sure we're developing diverse talent to grow into leadership roles and frankly, to hire diverse talent into leadership roles now, not wait. Sourcing, we've, you know, reviewed every contract and RFP that comes up, we make sure we have a diverse slate. But on the brand side, where we've collaborated so well this year across the organization, I'm incredibly proud. My team looked across every consumer touch point and really came up with very specific actionable initiatives that we could affect in real time. And there are things like representation in our advertising, the way that the language that we use. And we looked at this diversity and inclusion from really every angle and came up with a list of over 200 action items that we took. And it really adds up to quite a lot. And one of the things I'm very proud of is our gender inclusion work. So we actually went ahead and changed our uniform policy to be more gender inclusive, gender neutral. And we even changed our language. So, you know, we no longer welcome our customers flying with ladies and gentlemen. We just say good morning, because why exclude the non-binary community in such a simple phrase, you know, in a way that I think people said, well, does that really matter? That's not offending everyone. Well, you know what, when you really kick the tires, you can make simple changes that make a big impact for many individuals. So, and together, a lot of these small moves have added up to quite a lot of difference, and we're measuring it. So we've gone ahead and put some work in the field to just understand how is JetBlue perceived from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. And we want to make sure that we lead our industry and that we're doing the right thing and we're correcting anything that we can improve.
That's great. I love the idea of looking at every touch point and really making sure it's inclusive. I mean, that's, you almost have to get to that level to really do it. Jennifer, do you have thoughts on, you know, what you guys have done and anything that has worked particularly well?
Yes, thanks. At Voya, again, last year had their first, I wasn't here at the time. I'm one of the people I mentioned who joined during the pandemic, had the first forum on racial injustice. 1,200 people attended. But the questions then became, well, is that going to continue after the media attention dies down on this topic? And Voya really committed to that. Later in the year, we took off on a task force, a DEI task force. 80 people, over 80 people from across the organization participated. 60% of them women, 50% of them people of color, looking across what we called colleagues, community, and clients, understanding where we can look, where can we make a difference, what are the things that we need to do differently. That work is shaping up. We focused initially on the African American and Black community. The recommendations that have come out of them, we're just so proud of, exceeded, I think, anyone's expectations. Really hearing from our employees, hearing from our ERGs, forums and focus groups, and communicating and really listening, even when sometimes what we were hearing was surprising to some individuals, and really understanding that information thoughtfully. So we're very proud of that. Also, having plans in place, we've been very pleased at being able to increase representation from in our leadership roles with previously underrepresented groups. So we know we have more work to do, but we're really pleased about the progress we've made. And again, hearing from our employees, they see that, they feel it. It starts with our CEO and at the top, and really does come down throughout the organization. We're taking that same model that we worked on to this DEI task force and shifting it and moving to focus on the Latinx community and other groups that are typically underrepresented. So really proud of that work. And again, holding ourselves accountable, continuing to engage people throughout the whole organization in this work that's so important.
Sandra, what about, what have you been doing at Nielsen in this regard?
Well, first of all, when I joined, of course, I said I was there for 7 weeks, and then we went into the pandemic. I will say, as a CDO, having done this for a while, I was prepared with a strategy as I went into Nielsen, and all of that went away because that strategy did not work. It was not timely. It was not effective to what we were going through. And this was learning by fire, and making sure that you're paying attention to as many details as possible about the human experience. And so after George Floyd, of course, it was a lot more added to the plate. And the first thing that we did do was we had a town hall. And as Jennifer mentioned, it was overwhelming, the attendance. We had over 10,000 people who joined that town hall. And the benefit from the conversations was enormous. And that was just, when I say conversation, it was raw. It was leadership presenting how they live. And these were diverse people telling their stories. And the result also of that is that people recognizing what this is about when you say privilege. So the town hall was called Race and Privilege. And you do also go up against some backlash with this kind of thing. And so we addressed both because we needed people to understand that this is about everyone. You can't be, you may want to separate, but you really can't separate yourself from what is actually happening. And so, as Elizabeth said, it's about framing this where, you know, people understand this. It's about how we retain the people that we have and how we view that in terms of equity. It's about building relationships across, up and down, making sure that our leadership actually has the foundation to extend those conversations beyond what we have ever done in the workplace. I mean, we have never touched this third rail like this. And as you said, is this going to last? Well, it actually has, because I think people in the reality of the pandemic have realized that people don't live the same as I do. And I didn't realize that. And now I see in a different way. I'm hearing you in a different way. And I'm treating you differently on a positive side. And so our leaders took it on. I was grateful to have a CEO who got it and has done it, because he actually had the CDO title at the time. He was CEO/CDO. And from that, we worked internally and externally. We helped small Black businesses by way of our business diversity, which was called supplier diversity, but we now call it business diversity. And then we also had a microsite to help people. You know, you can't, everybody can't talk, but you can educate. Self-education is a very good thing. So we gave people tools and resources in which they could expand their understanding of, so who is that person and what are they about? So that as managers, you can manage with cultural competence. You can manage with a different perspective and understand, I didn't get up the same way as you did. I really didn't.
I think what's really interesting is I know a lot of companies are having conversations about privilege and what that really means and what that really looks like. You know, in some ways it's remarkable, as you said, you know, companies never had these conversations before. And, you know, they're challenging conversations to have. But, you know, I think if you're going to have diversity and inclusion, you got to have those conversations as well, so that everybody's grounded and this is what this really is about and what we have to deal with.
Absolutely, that cultural competence that you just mentioned, I think many of us are engaging in that, and that's really important. Voya, we went another step further and helping people understand what it's about to be an ally, understanding everyone isn't in the same group, and understanding how that individual can help, how we can be an ally to somebody. And we have really proud that 98% of our employees have gone through that awareness training now on being an ally.
That's great. I'm going to open it up for questions. So there have been a couple that have come in that I'll share, but if you have more, please put them in the chat and we'll answer it. Let's see. So an anonymous person says, this has been great. At the beginning, we heard about how millennials wanted to be heard in the organization, and it's refreshing to hear you all have had an open dialogue during the pandemic. How are you thinking about facilitating this dialogue as people return to the office? We've touched on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear whether you have specific programs in place to help as people go back, hear about their experiences and address them.
So, you know, funny enough, we've had this conversation at the leadership level, because we should not deny that as we come back into the office, that you should hear from people what their experience has been in this year and a half, because there has been change in my spirit and who I am. And if I can start my meeting by saying, what has the pandemic done regarding you personally and professionally, that you have changed as you do your own work and as you engage other people? What is that like? You need to have, it absolutely needs to be, I know we call them icebreakers, but you really do need to have that conversation. I don't think you can walk back into the office and say, oh yeah, let's have this meeting. No, I haven't seen you in a year and a half. And that's in and of itself is odd. But the reality is something happened to you. And for
well,
me to deny you, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, to that point, you know, one of the conversations we've had with our leadership team is we've gone through a global trauma. I mean, that's what it was. It was a global trauma that every one of us went through. And, you know, typically with trauma, you get through it, and it's after the trauma that you really start to feel it and process it. And we're just beginning that. I think it's so, what you're saying is so important, because we almost have to acknowledge that and deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer,
and that it is
Elizabeth,
not
what are your
over.
thoughts?
Oh,
Yep.
absolutely,
it-
Elizabeth. We don't know what's around the next corner.
Right.
But that authenticity, I think, is so important, as you were saying. Really, we have to be genuine and authentic and hear from people. Again, someone may return to the workplace one day and realize, no, it's not for me. Hopefully we can be respectful and responsive to that. We just don't know what we're going to experience, and being able to apply that same empathy and being flexible, hopefully, as we move forward through this.
I'm going to go to another question. How do you encourage younger employees to stay engaged so they don't feel so isolated? And we saw this with our employees a little bit. I don't know whether you guys saw it, which is, a lot of the younger employees lived on their own or with roommates that they weren't especially close to. How do you help them, stay engaged and not feel, that not going into the office every day isn't, sort of an isolating experience?
I think we have to create cohorts of a small group whereby they have someone that they can express themselves, talk about their experience as either a new employee or just as a young person in the business now. So, okay. And by the way, what I'm feeling as I'm, learning and growing. We can't leave them alone. I would strongly suggest that we then put leaders responsible for those cohorts so that they can keep in touch with them. I hate the thought of these young people not having the in-office experience.
Yeah.
I really do, because that is where you created your friends, and that was the baseline of being in the corporate world. And if you don't have that, what do you do? So I would create smaller groups so that you have conversation. And of course, we have our business resource groups. I would tell people immediately to join those so that you have other people who are, of course, had longer tenure at the organization, and also they just have common interests. So join your BRGs, business resource groups, I'm sorry.
Jennifer and Elizabeth, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with the resource groups, the councils, the cohorts, potentially, the more that we can engage individuals in projects and having them be able to participate and cut across the organization. Yes, they're meeting people in a different way, but I share concerns that people aren't going to have, they're going to have a different experience than what we traditionally had, and trying to make sure that those people who are in office versus those who are remote are being treated the same and sharing similar experiences. So we all need to be mindful of that as well going forward.
And just making sure that they have experiences where they can build real relationships. I was actually challenged by a crew member on this concept of real, and it's something that stuck with me, that I said, oh, it'll be nice to see everyone in real life. And their response was, well, what did you think this was? This was real for me. You were really engaging with me. What is reality? I'm a geriatric millennial, apparently. And so and it really stuck with me about what is that? And, how can that, so regardless of how that happens, and it may happen in ways that aren't like how they used to happen, or at least not for a while, how do they create those relationships that do underlie the foundation of being able to get work done with and through others? If it's all about the work and not about the people, then nothing's going to happen, because it was never just the work. It was relationship building.
Okay, you listen, right? Listen to what their ideas are and their thoughts and their concerns are too. We need to listen and see how we can shift.
So I'm gonna go to the last question, and I think there's something really astute about that question. How are you best supporting HR teams in different ways today, who, if you look back on the past year, have had so much more on their plate, including keeping employees engaged and productive, diversity and inclusion, mental health, the amount of work that fell to a lot of our HR teams was pretty extraordinary when you look at it. How do you think about partnering with your HR teams to help them as they're doing the heavy lifting in a lot of these areas?
The HR teams have been doing a lot of heavy lifting. We call ours the people team, and they've been really incredible throughout this, and they'll continue to be as we face retention challenges and recruitment challenges. But I think, all of the things that you listed as responsibilities are also just responsibilities of leadership. And it would be a complete abdication of leadership to imagine that, oh, HR does that, I just do what? The business. It's so commingled. And so back to what we were talking about at the beginning around leading and managing the whole person, that's really incumbent on managers and leaders at every level to support the HR function.
I also feel that, the managers do have to up their game. This heavy load cannot be lifted just by HR or DE&I. The leadership, yes, but the manager that I call it the frozen middle need to thaw out and get with it, because this is not the same as being in the office managing people. And you have to be very, very fastidious, and you have to have a plan. You really do. You have to have a plan, and you have to pay attention to each person on your team. It is incumbent upon you in terms of retention of you to pay attention. And, I know that there are managers who will say, well, I think I'm doing enough. I'm doing enough. Well, this has changed everything. So your load is different, but in a different way. So you have to sort of, pull it together, look at yourself and understand. And by the way, self-awareness is very important in this. That if this is not the job for you now, then this is a critical time for you to make an assessment. Because everybody is not good at managing people. So we need to own that, but we also need to help those who are in positions of managing. What is it that you need now? Because there are tools and resources they need now that are different from.
Agree. Okay, so I think that is about our time. I want to thank Jennifer and Sandra and Elizabeth for their candor and their wisdom. And, I think, you've all given me stuff to think about that I want to go talk to our teams about, and hopefully we've done the same for the participants. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ad Club.
Thank you, Kasha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Elizabeth. Bye, Jennifer.
Bye,
Bye.
Cassandra. Thank you.
Sure.